So welcome everyone to the Menopause at Work Network meeting. My name's Thea and I'm the founder and director of Menopause at Work. It's great to see a few new faces on the line today. And for those of you who I haven't met before, as mentioned, I'm the founder and director of Menopause at Work. I've been doing this work for about 7 years now and helping workplaces become menopause literate so that women don't have to suffer in silence, so that workplaces can be supportive and compliant, and also help retain some of their more experienced staff. So these sessions, which are quarterly network meetings, are designed to bring workplace professionals together so that we can learn from experts, researchers, and perhaps most importantly, learn from our peers. Because I don't know about you, but some of the most valuable learning I get is hearing from other people at the coalface, doing the hard yards, and then being willing to share some of the insights that they've gleaned along the way. And that's definitely the flavour of today's session. So one of the common questions that I get asked is, well, how do we get this started? Or how do I get a bit more traction around menopause awareness and support in the workplace? And it's something I see asked and also see some organisations grappling with. Now, sometimes that whole process might happen kind of like by textbook. You know, a need is identified by consulting staff or recognising one's legal obligations, and then a plan's put together and it gets put up to the executive and that gets approved and you get a little budget and it's integrated into strategy and off you go. That's amazing when that happens, but I'd say that's probably the minority of cases. Usually, how does it start? It usually starts with one brave woman starting to rattle the cage and agitate for change. And we've got two such of those women online today to share how they've managed to start changing culture within workplaces. And I'm going to introduce them shortly. So just to give you a sense of the format, both Andrew and Melissa are going to speak for about 15, 20 minutes, sharing their experience and their lessons learnt. Then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. And because it is a network meeting, depending how we go for time, do like to get people into breakout rooms so you can have a bit of a chat, hear what other people are doing, and also distill what you would like to take away from today's session. And then on the hour, at 1 o'clock, we turn off the recording and we have about 10 minutes for informal chat if anyone would like to hang back from that. So at this point, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to introduce our first person today. Just let me change my view here. Our first presenter today. So I'd really love to welcome Melissa Stewart. So Melissa actually has a background in event management and communication. And she's worked at the University of Melbourne since 2017. And she's currently the change and communications lead. And she's also got a graduate diploma in journalism and writing. And Melissa has successfully campaigned for groundbreaking menopause and menstrual leave at the University of Melbourne, and has founded a somewhat thriving University of Melbourne period and menopause staff network. So Melissa, we'd love to hear, how did this all start? What's the journey been like? And what have you learnt along the way about being an accidental advocate for menopause change in the workplace?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate you being here and supporting this event. And thank you, Thea, for having me. I really wanted to sort of reflect and share my story in quite an informal conversational way today. So for me, sort of what has led me here today is a journey that started back in September of 2022. It was a random work from home day. I was having a particularly rough and painful experience with my period that day. So I did have the good fortune of being able to work from home, but I did find myself quite literally on the floor in the fetal position, certainly yelling out some very colourful words, which I won't repeat now. But, you know, it was that moment where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to pull it together and go to this Zoom meeting, as I'm sure many of us here on this call would have a perhaps similar experience of. Got through the meeting ended, and I thought, this is like, I cracked it, basically, is the best way I can describe it. I'd had enough. And it was at that time that I sort of recalled that I knew the Victorian Women's Trust, which is a not-for-profit here in Victoria, supporting sort of women's support services across a variety of facets. they had, since 2016, their own menstrual leave policy, which is now inclusive of menopause. And that was a publicly available template they had on their website. And I knew that sort of existed previous to my little outburst on this random work from home day. So what ended up happening was that very night, I commenced work on a proposal which became about 25 pages, inspired by my own experience, the experiences of my friends, family, colleagues, and using that template that the Victorian Women's Trust had publicly available. So my challenge then became, for those perhaps familiar with working in universities or perhaps even the public service, the enormous challenge, diversity, size, the moving feast that is really complex organisations, and trying to present a proposal that really spoke to the necessity of having menstruation and menopause leave available for staff who needed it. So over the coming sort of months from that September 2022 period, as I said, I got to work on what became a 25-page proposal for university leadership. And it's in that sort of research period that I included information from journal articles, academic journal articles, I should say. I spoke to people at other organisations, noting that at that time, there was really very, very little to go off in terms of precedent. It's slightly different now, which is great to see. I know a number of organisations have their version of menstruation and menopause leave now, but at the time it was very, very few and far between. But I was able to speak to a couple of organisations that had their version of it. And I also referenced the University of Melbourne's various sort of annual reports and strategies that spoke to, again, the necessity of why this leave needed to be included and not be considered as part of sick leave, because it was a key sort of light bulb moment for me very early in my research that menstruation and menopause, they're not illnesses, sicknesses or diseases. So why are we using our sick leave? That was really sort of the core sort of impetus of what this proposal became. But I couldn't just very well email a random sort of manager or leader in the university and ask it. As I said, there are certain challenges with working at a university or public service, huge amounts of complexity and consultation involved, particularly for something as frankly innovative and progressive as what I was asking for in this proposal. What I also did during this research period was I really did want to emphasise, again, it's a university, I really did want to emphasise the research and the data and the evidence around what I could find based on menstruation and menopause sort of experiences, symptoms, impacts on workplace experience. But what I also wanted to do was humanise that story as well and not have it just be a set of what I felt was like very cold data. So I went about seeking what I called personal impact statements from sort of my colleagues. And that ended up becoming a bit of a domino effect in that I received 41 personal impact statements from my university colleagues, most of whom I didn't know. And what I was asking was for people to sort of reflect on their workplace experience, on their menstruation to menopause journey, and what this type of leave would mean for them, should it be implemented. And I included those stories in my proposal. So it was really striking that balance, as I say, between that sort of humanised personal story and also referring to sort of evidence-based statistics and data, again, reflecting the university's research centre and focus, basically. And then the journey began in sort of socialising this proposal and considering the different avenues through which it could go through. The university does have representation through the National Teachers Education Union, as well as from policy, workplace and organisational policies. Obviously, that'll be different for your organisation depending on sort of what sector it sits in. So there were options for me to pursue this through those avenues. So what ended up, sort of a bit of a long story short in terms of consultation and reaching out to stakeholders, was having the opportunity to present this proposal to our bargaining team for the university, who sort of represents the university in the bargaining process to establish each version of the university's enterprise agreement and those negotiations with the union, as I just mentioned. So cut to the enterprise agreement for 2024. So about 18 months after I started this journey and started the proposal, we became the 4th Australian university to have our version of menstruation and menopause leave in an enterprise agreement. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we were on track to be the first university, but perhaps some of those who are familiar with negotiating enterprise agreements, those processes can be quite lengthy. And there were 3 universities that just beat us earlier in 2024, which is really exciting for them. So we're in the top 4, which is great. I'm very proud of that. So since the 10th of April, 2024, we have had what is called in the enterprise agreement EA special leave, and that is 10 days per calendar year for continuing and part-time staff to use, as I said, up to 10 days non-cumulative of special leave per year. It's not something that's available to casual staff. It is just for part-time and permanent staff. And I have seen that we've had a number of people use the leave so far, which is fantastic. I don't have the detailed information, but I do know that it is being accessed and used. And also I know anecdotally, because I still to this day have quite a number of university colleagues, again, most of whom I don't know, who will message me and say that they've used the leave and what a difference it's made to them. And I even get stories about, I've just received my diagnosis of perimenopause. I thought you'd like to know. So, which is always really exciting to hear and see those messages. And I would also mention here as well that inclusive of what is called here at the university EA special leave, so it covers menstruation, perimenopause and menopause. It is also inclusive of chronic illness as well, which may or may not be related to reproductive health issues. So it is a 2-part leave clause, and particularly named that way, while I have been certainly encouraging and leaning into using words like menstruation, perimenopause and menopause, also conscious of the fact that it's important that people still feel like they can have discretion and privacy around the types of leave that they are requesting with their supervisors. Noting as well that I sometimes have to pull myself back from the work that I have done and continue to do, noting that I've been sort of in this for over 3 years now, and it is still quite a journey for a lot of people in terms of just even simply talking about it with people they know or work with, let alone perhaps having conversations with, their supervisors, managers, executive leaders, etc. So that's the leave portion, but the work certainly continued last year in that I developed a proposal for the university to roll out staff training. The intention being that I wanted to help sort of destigmatise and demystify the at-work experience for those who do experience menstruation through to menopause. And for us here at the University of Melbourne, that's 61% of staff. So it's well over half the staff population. And of course, as I hope we all know here in this webinar today, if you're not directly experiencing it, you're working with someone who is. So it does impact everybody, which is why I did want to have these staff training sessions, or workplace education sessions as I'm referring them to as, so we can help build basic knowledge of what menstruation, perimenopause and menopause is. I'd never heard of perimenopause when I started this journey 3 years ago. I just thought it was all menopause. So a real opportunity to sort of cover the basics in what I'm hoping these sessions will look like, and also as well to help all staff and particularly managers and leaders to sort of build that confidence and comfort with having conversations with their staff and colleagues about these really real and practical experiences that so many of their colleagues and staff are experiencing. So that is still a work in progress. I still am having conversations with the various powers that be here at the university to see how we can implement those in a way that really embeds into the culture of the university. But in the meantime, earlier this year, I launched a staff network, so the period of menopause, or PAMS staff network. So I have, at the moment, about half an hour ago, 431 staff members in this network, which I think that might make it maybe the 8th or 7th biggest staff community here at the university, which is very exciting. And that really, in establishing that network and opportunity for people to connect, was to really have sort of 3 pillars of what I felt was needed here at the university in addressing sort of the culture piece around this and sort of moving the needle in terms of breaking that sort of taboo and stigma and shame that still exists around this topic, which is having the accessible leave, space for community, which is this network, and education, which I'm still chipping away at. So I really am hoping to have some version of some staff training and certainly building out our resources into 2026. And before I take a breath, I think the final thing I'd want to mention as well as part of building out those education and community pieces is having events as well, not just for our PAMS network members, but for all staff to come along to. Just last week, I hosted an expert panel event and a first time event here at the university ever, where we had both academic staff and what we refer to here at the university as professional staff, so staff such as myself who are not academics. We had a combination of those types of staff on a panel talking about menopause at work, particularly where it intersects with mental health, gender equity and workplace supports. So that was an enormous feat here at the university to have that opportunity to hold that event and have a really wonderful conversation, such as what we're having today, about how we can keep moving the needle on staff culture here at the university and what that looks like, not just this year, but really embedding it as a very normalised thing that we do here at the university. Again, in regards to the leave, making that more accessible, more available, more known. Noting that, we have 20,000 plus people here that work at the university. We're an enormous organisation. So I am aware that it is still some work to get that more known in the staff community, but we're working on it. And again, really building that staff community that we have, getting people on board to sort of talk about it, share some news stories and journal articles that they've seen, and again, really having that embedded with the staff training sessions. So there's really sort of 3 key pillars, and having that sense of normalcy and community is really the dream here. So it's been a big 3 years, and I certainly haven't done it on my own. I have had the incredible support of sort of my immediate team and those around me, because this was not something that was part of my job in any way. I do have the wonderful benefit of being in change management and communications in my current role. So I was certainly able to draw on that experience. But all of this work that I have mentioned here was done sort of outside. It had nothing to do with my day job, is effectively what I'm saying. So, but I have had the wonderful benefit of having supportive, managers and leaders in my area and that of my team and sort of wider colleagues. So that has been hugely beneficial, and I certainly wouldn't be here speaking with you all today without that support. And that is sort of the very short version of the last 3 years. But Thea, if you're happy for me to sort of slide into sort of key takeaways and lessons learned before I hand over to Andrea. I'm sorry, I'm not keeping time, so
No,
please
you're
cut me off.
perfectly on time. Just before we go into the
Yeah,
lessons and just to flesh out the story a little bit,
yeah, sure.
before you introduce the leave or started
Mm,
that, had the university done anything at all? So were you kind of going in
no,
cold or had there been any groundwork? So going in.
going in freezing.
Got it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
got it.
yeah. This was a brand new
Yeah,
concept
yeah.
um, for
Understood.
the university. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So
Yep.
yeah, I'd love to hear what you've gleaned from the years of
Yes.
advocacy. Yeah.
Look, linking in from that sort of final comment I made about it not having anything sort of to do with my day job, reflecting back on the last 3 years, it was really important. And I sort of did this without really realizing it at the time, but playing to your strengths. So if you are sort of taking on that role in your sort of organization of being sort of that advocate or champion for progressing, be it staff training, be it leave, be it building a community, um, you don't need to be, for example, an expert in women's health, like Dr. Binks here will speak to in a moment. Or, you don't need to be an expert in human resources or enterprise agreements. I was none of and am none of those things. But what I was able to play to was, as I've said, my background in change management, communications. Any event managers here in the room, you know that it's a bit of a managing a circus and all the different stakeholders. So I was really able to play to that. Um, so I encourage you to really lean into what your strengths are if you are taking on that advocacy role. And as part of that is speaking to experts in your organisation or other colleagues as part of building your community. As I said, there is no way possible I could have done this on my own. Yes, I sort of wrote that proposal and sort of leading sort of the creation of the staff network, but without the support of not just my colleagues, but my reaching out to experts here at the university in, for example, women's health and menopause, in uh, legal matters, in organisational development, all of these experts that I spoke to build these proposals, it simply wouldn't have been possible. So I really encourage you to lean in to your networks and the experts you work with, or even at those outside of your organisation, because it can be a very, not all the time, but there are moments where it can feel very sort of lonely and isolating. You feel like you're just sort of running that race and trying to make this enormous progress in your organization, and it can feel like you're doing it on your own when that is just simply not the case. You will have amazing support from your colleagues if you sort of reach out and encourage them to connect with sort of the goal of what you're working towards. So building the community around you is just crucial. And second to that as well, third to that, I would say it can, I know I'm leaning into the negative slightly, but it can be a really difficult journey, particularly, as I say, working at complex organisations such as universities, public service, or perhaps multinational private organisations, where it's not as simple as, emailing your manager and asking for something and it'll get ticked off. Certainly not the case here. So there are days where you might be sort of one step forward, two steps back. So, and then of course my algorithm everywhere is just constant menopause information now, and I'm surrounded by it by choice, which is just incredible because my learning journey is still ongoing. So I would just really emphasize, and I know this perhaps might be really obvious to say, but to really give yourself a break. And I mean, I am reading a book about menstruation at the moment in my spare time, which is, I don't need to be doing that all the time, but being kind on yourself and really being aware that progress is really difficult and it does take hard work, but giving yourself a break and really acknowledging the work and commitment that you are making and celebrating the wins along the way. I think that is just so important. And and recognizing the progress and the positives, even if it is just sort of that one colleague who's messaged you to say, thank you for whatever it is in this space that you've done, that really makes a difference. So leaning into all the different emotions, good days and bad days on the journey, I really encourage you to lean in and be kind to yourself on the journey as well, because it can be really hard, but it is so, so worth it. So yeah, lean in. It can be a bit of a roller coaster, but it's a good one. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing your experience there. And what struck me up front was, how you combine the stats with the stories. And I love the concept
Yes.
of personal impact statements. That must have been
Yep.
the journalist in you, recognizing the importance of stories, personal stories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm by no means a data, numbers, statistics driven person. I am a writer at heart.
Yes.
So really humanizing that data, and acknowledging as well that, people, I was presenting this proposal to a range of different people, different levels of seniority, different backgrounds, different areas of expertise. So being able to present information in a way that whoever was reading it could tap in and respond to what spoke to them. So if I was speaking to someone with more of a finance background or that HR background, they would more likely perhaps connect to sort of the data in terms of getting them over the line and bringing them on board. Where perhaps if I was speaking to someone more on sort of the health side of things, or perhaps even HR as well, I feel like they cross those two boundaries, really humanizing that real lived experience and bringing that to the front as well. So being aware of your audience and presenting that information, was really valuable.
Absolutely. Sounds great. And that relates to your top tip, which is play to your strengths. And yours is obviously comms and understanding your target market. So look, thank you for that. If anyone's got a burning question for Melissa, jot it down, because we will go straight to Andrea and then we'll open it up more broadly for questions. But yeah, great to hear, and well done on your 3 years of change making outside of your normal job description.
Yes.
Not quite sure how you do that. We'll have to pick you up on that one.
Sure. Thanks, Thea.
Thank you. And so I'd now like to switch to quite a different industry and profession and introduce you to Andrea Binks. So welcome, Andrea. Thanks so much for joining us today. So Dr. Andrea Binks is a qualified anaesthetist and intensivist. I didn't know what an intensivist was, so I had to go and look it up. Tell me if this is right, Andrea. But apparently it's a physician specialising in the care of critically ill patients, typically those in ICU. She practices out of Wollongong. And she also supervises the training of other anaesthetists, and she's also an examiner for the Australian New Zealand College of Anaesthetists. And Andrea is really passionate about supporting her fellow female colleagues. And she put in a submission to the Senate inquiry, to give some feedback on how menopause was impacting female anaesthetists. But Andrea, your day job involves keeping people sedated and safe. So I'd love to know how you ended up splashed across the Sydney Morning Herald in 2023, full-blown photo and quotes talking about your menopause work. Can you please step us through, what sparked your work in this area, and how's it going, and what you've learned along the way?
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, thank you, Thea. You may well have noticed in that lovely introduction by Thea, there's no mention in there about any expertise in women's health, and that's because I don't have any expertise in women's health. I learned about women's health in medical school, which was a very long time ago, and I have not had any updated training in women's health since then. So everything I've learned along the way, I feel like I'm learning along with everybody else. So, my journey into this is sort of very much accidental. So I'm going to share a few slides just to kind of keep me on track as to what I'm talking about. So I'll share my screen now, and just let me know if you can, when it comes up. Yep, can you see that?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, fantastic. So I just to share a few words about my journey in this advocacy space, which is not where I thought I would be at this point, but I'm very much enjoying the journey. Okay, so why does menopause culture matter? Well, Well, I guess the question is, what, I guess, why am I talking to you? I'm an anaesthetist. Yes, I am a healthcare practitioner, but I have no experience in dealing with women's health. So my journey started also in 2022. So Melissa, I think we're going to find a lot of commonalities to our story here. I was helping to organise the Australian New Zealand College of Anaesthetists annual scientific meeting, which was taking place in Sydney in 2023. And I was workshop convener. So I was sorting out things like, how to do regional anesthesia, how to use ultrasounds, how to do life support courses, nothing to do with much in the well-being space. And a colleague of mine said, why aren't we talking about menopause? And I thought, I don't know why we're not talking about menopause. And she said, well, you're a workshop convener. Can you do a workshop on menopause? So I thought, sure, why not? And so I thought, well, I don't know anything about menopause. I'd better find some people who do. So I reached out to a good friend of mine who's a GP in our local area who has a specialist interest in menopause. And she put me in touch with Thea. So which is where our connection came in. And Katie and Thea and myself sat down and we came up with a structure for a workshop that we could run for anaesthetists about menopause, just touching on what is menopause, what are the treatment options, what can you do about it. And then Thea did an amazing piece on like how you can make changes in your workplace to do with menopause. But we agreed at that point that we probably needed a representative from the craft groups because I could bring in these experts on menopause, but we needed some sort of link as to why it was appropriate for anaesthetists. And beyond my one colleague who said, we need to talk about menopause, and I said, do you want to come and talk about it? And she said, no, I can't be there. I thought, where am I going to find an anaesthetist to talk about menopause? And after realizing at that point it wasn't appropriate to go around asking all my colleagues, excuse me, are you perimenopausal? Do you want to talk about it? I thought, well, it's going to have to be me. So my role as in the workshop was going to be to talk about why it's important to anaesthetists. And I thought, well, I can talk about my experience through perimenopause, but I have like one person experience, and every woman's experience of perimenopause is likely to be very different. So I thought I'm going to have to look at the data. So I'm, as a doctor, as an anaesthetist, I'm very much science and data driven. So I thought I'm just going to have to get some more information here. So I designed a survey that I put out on SurveyMonkey, just asking about people's experiences of menopause and perimenopause and how it had affected them at work. And in my hospital, we have a WhatsApp group for the female anaesthetist. So I sent it to my WhatsApp group and I got lots of responses back. And we had 10 people in my group. It's not very big. And I thought, well, actually, I'm quite lucky. I'm a supervisor of training. I'm linked in with the supervisor of training network. I'm an examiner for the college. I'm linked in with the examiner network. I'm also helping to organise this big conference. I'm linked in with all sorts of people who are helping to organise a big scientific conference. What if I send it to all my friends and get them to send it to their networks? So that's essentially what I did. And the survey, I think we got something like 120 responses initially, which was amazing. So the survey was anonymous, it was quick, it was you could fill it in as many times as you want, with the idea that it was nice and safe for people to fill this information in. There was no way of me tracing it back to any one individual response. And I also left lots of free text boxes so people could really have their say. And I'm just going to share with you a few of the results that I got from that survey. So the first question was, have you experienced any symptoms impacting on your physical and or mental health as a result of perimenopause or menopause? And 80% of the people who responded to this survey said yes. So 26% just physical symptoms, 6% said just mental health symptoms, and 47% said yes, both physical and mental health symptoms. And then the free text boxes, I'm sorry if my pictures are coming up, if my face is over some of this, but, I've bolded the symptoms here, but, sort of physical symptoms, so hot flushes, fatigue, poor sleep, brain fog, weight gain, but also sort of feeling tired, feeling grumpy, melancholy. You know, this one's very specific to my industry. But lots of people expressing lots of different types of symptoms. And then another question was, what impact have menopause symptoms had on your working life? So 23% said significant impact, 40% saying slight impact. So 65% of women reporting at least some impact on the way they work. And again, some physical symptoms, so hot flushes at night causing lack of sleep. But this is where the kind of the insecurity about brain fog, making people feel like they are incompetent, feeling burnt out, dropping out of more senior roles, withdrawing from non-clinical work. So our clinical work is where we're delivering anesthesia within an operating theatre. Non-clinical work is things like the mentorship, the leadership, the getting involved in policy making, education of our junior trainees. And women were reporting dropping out of those sorts of roles at this time in life. So another question was, have you made or would you consider making changes to your working life? So 23% of women said, yes, I've made some changes. Another 8% said, no, but I want to. 5% said, I've tried, but I can't. Reassuringly, 40% said, I don't need to. And it seems that a lot of this is about fatigue management. So working less hours, not doing on calls as much lower threshold of calling in sick, but also this dropping leadership, dropping teaching responsibilities, transitioning away from the sort of the additional roles. And as we know, it's a long road in medicine. It's a long time. It takes a long time to go through training. So women are reaching the peak of their careers around the same time they're reaching this menopause transition. So it seems a real shame that women who are reaching the peak of their careers are feeling unable to continue because of a physical health issue. So there were a few other questions, but those are the sort of the main take-home ones. So I had over 100 responses, and although I appreciate it's women who want to answer, well, mostly women, I didn't actually ask any gender questions. I'm assuming it's mostly women who answered this question. It's likely to be a self-selected population of people who want to answer questions about perimenopause. But of those women, 80% said they have had some symptoms, and 65% said that those symptoms were significant enough to impact on the way they work. When I was asking about what changes we should make, it seems that a very individual response was called for, but a big emphasis on the need to raise awareness of menopause as an issue for women. I don't quite know why we've carried on with the slide. Anyway, we'll go with it. So what did I do from there? Well, I started out just locally, so talking to my department, talking to our peri-op nursing colleagues, doing some staff wellbeing, evening sessions. I've continued with the ANSCA workshops, and so I've now done 3 years worth of workshops, and I've now developed a menopause toolkit for women to take away to try and make some changes in their own local department. Doctors and healthcare in general seem to respond well to data and scientific evidence. So I put my survey data into a poster that was presented at a UK anaesthesia meeting and has now been published in scientific and peer-reviewed scientific journal. So now I have actual I have proper scientific evidence that this is an issue. And I've been asked to talk at a lot of webinars, mostly around presenting my data. Okay, so this is the menopause toolkit. I've basically just pulled together a lot of resources that are freely available, mostly involving what is menopause, what are the treatment options, what are some of the impacts we could see at work, and what are some of the things that we can do about it, both personally and professionally. This was the poster I showed at the conference in the UK. Interestingly, having had a little bit of traction and impact here locally, I had 0 impact at this conference. Nobody wanted to speak to me about this. It'd be really interesting to see if that's still the case if I was to present it again. Unfortunately, with the way scientific literature works, I can't present this same data a second time. I have to have new data to present, but I'm working on that, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. So this is just to say there's a little bit of a ripple effect. You kind of start small, and then gradually, the more you talk about it, the more people feel like it's a safe topic. And the more I talk about it, the more people talk to me about it. And so therefore, the word spreads and it becomes a lot more normalized. So what happened next? Well, I guess I've been very lucky to have lots of people on my side, and the College of Anaesthetists, so ANZGA, has been hugely supportive of me. So the comms department at the college put me in touch with Wendy Toohey, who's a journalist who writes for The Age, and it was her article that Thea was mentioning being on the front of the Sydney Morning Herald. And it was published to coincide with the time of our presenting the first workshops at the Sydney conference in 2023. So since then, I've been contacted by other journalists. I've spoken on local radio programs. I've had this article published in AusDoc, which goes to physicians across the whole of the country. And then, as Thea said, I was encouraged by the College of Anaesthetists and also by our Gender Equity Subcommittee to put in a submission to the Senate inquiry on issues related to menopause and perimenopause. And I was asked to present my evidence to the Senate. So I guess this shows that with a little bit of evidence and a bit of courage and some people on your side, maybe a bit of talking can actually lead to policy change, which is amazing. I didn't think I'd ever be in that kind of position of influence, if that is indeed what this is. So I guess the question is, well, what happens now? So I've done all my talking up until now. I guess the first thing is we do need to normalize these conversations. And Melissa, I was seeing a lot of similarities in the work that you're doing. The more you talk about these issues, the more people will talk to you about it, and it becomes a lot more of a normal conversation. I think there does need to be a little bit of work in terms of embedding menopause into wellbeing frameworks, but also into staff education, into leadership training, and also into workforce health and safety policies. I'd like to continue my research. As I say, I come from a very scientific background. That's what makes sense to me. I have redesigned my survey. There were a few problematic issues with the first one that I've had lots of vocal feedback about. So I've now redesigned my survey with Thea's help, and I have sent my survey out to a couple of different craft groups. So I've sent it out to a group of emergency physicians and also to a group of gynae oncology physicians. On the back of talking at their conferences. And I'm getting back lots of really interesting new information, which hopefully I can do some work with. Again, working within the scientific literature, I need to have ethics approval. So I've managed to get ethics approval to continue my survey. It's going to end up being a bigger piece of work. And just like Melissa, this is not my day job. I also have to do my day job and all the other roles that go along with my day job, and do this because I think it's important at some point in between. But I think the main thing is really creating a safe culture. So a culture where menopause is discussed nice and comfortably, just as we discuss parental leave. And there's been a big piece of work about shared parental leave and making sure that people of all genders have access to parental leave. So, this needs to be part of the bigger conversation about, working safely, working in a way that's sort of fulfilling for all of us. This is just, this was an email I had this week from work. I remember when I did my first talk in 2023 in menopause, it's like World Menopause Day and World Menopause Month. There was zero communication from the hospital. This is healthcare. We should know about menopause, right? But we don't. So this year, 2025, they're actually sending out information. This is going to all staff about menopause in the workplace. And I thought it's a fantastic sign of change. So moving on to the lessons I've learned, I guess the first thing is you kind of have to start somewhere. And sometimes it starts with difficult questions. And if nobody's asking the difficult questions, maybe the answer is maybe it's you have to ask the difficult questions. If you don't start somewhere, nothing's going to change. I think Melissa said the same thing. Data opens doors. If I was just talking about menopause and the fact that it's affecting 50% of the population and that women find it difficult at this time, nothing happens. We've been saying that for a while. But actually having hard, cold data has really made a big difference, because once the data's there in black and white, it's a lot more difficult to ignore. And it's actually having that data that's managed to open a lot of the doors for me along the way. As the third thing for me is it's the little things that eventually snowball to make big change. If I hadn't said yes to do it to that workshop on menopause in the first place, and then thought, okay, I need some more information, and then said yes to doing a webinar, then I wouldn't have been introduced to the gender equity subcommittee and then I wouldn't have gone to the Senate inquiry. So it's saying yes to things along the way. You don't know where it's going to go, but why not just say yes and see what happens? I think the fourth thing, this isn't just about women, this is about everybody, right? So yes, we're talking about menopause and perimenopause and how it affects women in the workplace. But if you have a workplace that is open to listening to people's issues, then that's going to be a workplace that will be inclusive to all sorts of things along the way. So yes, we can start making changes for women, but this isn't a gender thing. This is about being good to people that we work with. And having inclusive and compassionate workspaces has got to be good for everybody. And then again, I think, Melissa, you said this as well. This isn't something you can do by yourself. Advocacy really is a team sport. By having people on your side and finding out who's willing to help along the way, we can start making a lot more changes. So having allies on all levels and leaders who are willing to listen, this is where the real change happens. So I guess, I didn't set out to be in this space, and I'm keen to change the narrative. So when I first started looking at menopause, this is the kind of image that comes up all the time. And, I share it for your amusement. We all kind of recognize a lot of those characters. But why is this the image that we have about menopause? Why can't we change it? And, I've got kids who've grown up with Disney in my house. So why can't we change it to something like this? So also inspired by Disney, 7 characters, they're all older women, and they all embody characteristics that I think we would all love to have. So I'll leave you with that. If I was better at graphics, I would make them look more like the 7 dwarves, but there's lots of positive role models of older women stepping into their power out there, and maybe we should be embodying these people instead. Okay, so that is all I was going to say. So I shall stop sharing my screen here.
That's brilliant, Andrea. I particularly loved your slide just summarising your key lessons, but I'm so glad that you've rewritten the 7 dwarfs and you're using that again. So look, we've got a few moments for some questions. If we could keep the questions focused on advocacy rather than say the pros and cons of leave. We did another network meeting on that. But do you have any questions for either Melissa or Andrea about, making change and being a change maker? You can either pop something in the chat box or you can pop your hand up, because we like to hear from people live. So has anyone got one? And just while I'm waiting to see if anyone's going to respond, I'm probably going to ask both of you to see if you can reflect on perhaps what might have been your most challenging aspect of this and how you got around it. So thanks, Anne. Would you recommend doing a similar survey at our institution? I guess you just mean your organisation, if you'd like to share on what your organisation is. But I know consulting staff is often a great way to go. And can you tell us a little bit more about your institution? Is that your workplace that you're referring to? But I'll throw over to you, Andrea and Melissa.
So I can jump in there.
Yeah.
Certainly for me, having information directly from the staff affected made a huge difference. One person sharing their experience doesn't really have a lot of impact. 100 people all sharing the same impact or like the same experience does really make people who are responsible for policy and change sit up and take notice. So definitely asking people's experiences, sharing their stories, I think does make a big difference.
Couple of things. I think, Thea, just reflecting on perhaps the most challenging part, and it is still the most challenging part, is ultimately what you're asking for is yes, sort of cultural change, attitude change in the workplace, but you're also asking someone, a team, a leader, for money, basically, to be crass about it. Sort of what budget allocation and who is approving the cost for implementing a leave type, for example, or implementing staff training. And that has been really challenging for me to get my head around. As I said, I'm not a numbers person. So really, again, being mindful of the audience and when you are having conversations, particularly with people with a budget remit or budget approval remits, that's the sort of ultimate question they'll always ask, even if they are very sort of morally supportive of what it is that you're trying to advocate for. They will also want to know how much it's going to cost and who's going to pay for it. So please keep that in mind. But I am, Thea, I think a couple of people have tagged me in the questions as well. I'm happy to speak to those.
It's fun just around, did you have support around you? And perhaps if when you're answering that, I'm also interested, you mentioned consultation a few times. Love to hear a bit more about what that entailed.
Yes. Yes, I did. In terms of having support around me, I, in my view, work in the best team at the University of Melbourne. And they know full well, because I'm always very excitedly sharing, I met with this person today, or I found this fun fact, or I had this meeting in our Teams chat constantly. So I do have the benefit of having an incredibly supportive sort of immediate team. And I hope that's an experience that all of us can have. I know that's not always the case, but having that sort of day-to-day personal support, whether you can find that in your immediate team, from your manager or from another colleague outside of your team and your organisation, I really encourage finding that support and leaning into it. But in terms of, the consultation and building that community, really quite crucial. So I really started with the obvious, which was sort of leaning on the people and networks I already had. I've now just clocked 8 years at the University of Melbourne, so it was sort of 5 years when I started on the journey. So I did have the benefit of having sort of a few years under my belt and sort of really knowing who to go to in building my community, getting that expert information, reaching out to colleagues who didn't know me, and asking them to trust me with their personal stories, and being really clear around what my goals were, providing those transparent updates, all of those sort of micro activities, and keeping the goal and the bigger mission at the front and centre of what it is that I was doing, particularly in those early advocacy proposal writing days, made all the difference. So now 3 years later, when I'm now asking, again, to be crass, I'm asking for money for things like staff training and sort of building out community events, I can go back to those same people who I've established those connections with over the last 3 years. And I know that I've got those there, at least in principle, support, and they can guide me to perhaps another person who might be better suited to help me, for example. So, starting with who you know is always a winner.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
Just got my eye on the time and aware that some of you might need to leave soon. So I just wanted to let you know that if any of you are thinking and planning, what you would like to do in your workplace over the next year, I'm offering free 30-minute mentoring sessions where you can just come and think out loud, and maybe I can help you with a bit of clarity and work out your next most important steps. For anyone who wants to make the most of that, that's available up until the end of November this year. But yeah, please make the most of that if you would like to. And before we formally end, but then go into informal chat, I just really wanted to thank Andrea and Melissa. And I jotted down the 5 C's that came out of both of your talks. So there was collecting data, consultation, getting other people on board, just the power of conversations and keeping on having conversations. That's the smallest unit of culture change, courage, and community, building, supportive people around you. So thank you for those insights into, I'm calling them the 5 C's of advocating for change.